Awesome. So day 17, and today I'm having a chat with Adam Kurdas of Tomorrow Man. How you doing, Adam?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Um, so why don't I start with a bit of an introduction? Uh, and just jump in if I'm saying anything incorrectly. So Tomorrow Man are a partner of Gotcha4Life, where you deliver workshops in the community. Um, I first came across Tomorrow Man in the Man Up documentary that Gus was in, that also Tom Harkin, the founder, was in. And I reached out to you probably a year ago now. It would have
Yeah.
been when I was thinking about Brisbane to Sydney, and I reached out to say, "Hey, I'm doing this event, and I'm thinking about potentially." Um, doing events along the route, and would you guys be interested? And I think within a short space of time, you flicked me a note back saying, yep, definitely, let's chat. And I suppose we've been in conversation since. I've been along to a couple of the Tomorrow Man events, Nights with the Blokes, um, and um, yeah, I dragged a couple of mates along, and they found it awesome. I think they weren't sure what to expect at first, and we can talk about that in a bit. Um, but why don't we start with yourself on talking a bit about the history of Tomorrow Man, how it's come into be, and how you got involved.
Yeah, cool. It's a long story, but I'll shorten it, I guess, as much as I can.
Yeah,
You mentioned Tom Harkin, obviously the founder of the organization, and Tomorrow Man. I mean, it's really his life's work. In all fairness, really reaching back to the days of when he was a teenager growing up in outer suburban Melbourne in Frankston here in Victoria.
yeah,
Um, and as a young male, being surrounded in that space by the traditional masculine stereotype as a kid. um, kind of tough guy, bit of a smart ass, stoic, don't share your emotions with anyone. Got into a bit of trouble and the like. And I guess along the way, he started to realize as he started to see, his mates and some of the other men, some of the other males around him start to suffer because the stereotype wasn't serving them or
mm,
him or us as blokes. And
yeah,
that really set him off on a path of trying to understand, what was going on for men, and obviously then progressing to working with men, and
mm,
and in particular, he worked with a lot of young men over the early parts of his career.
yeah,
And you mentioned Gotcha4Life, and really, I guess Tomorrow Man took off, as a result of, I guess what was a bit of a chance encounter, chance meeting between Tom and Gus that you've mentioned
yeah,
on the Man Up documentary. So that documentary featured Tom and the work that he'd been doing in Gus's son's school,
yeah,
and very as a result of Gus seeing that work and seeing what Tom was able to do within a very short space of time with a group of young men, in terms of being able to, I guess, really just hold the mirror up to the stereotype and kind of changing their attitudes towards being a little more emotional and vulnerable and
yeah,
open. That just sparked a very beautiful relationship between Gus and Tom. It kickstarted the creation of the Gotcha4Life Foundation.
mm,
Tom, after the airing of that documentary, came back to his office and had upwards of 500 or 600 emails from schools and organisations around the country saying, whatever that was, we need that.
yeah,
And at the same time, Gussie had said, hey, look, I think what you've done is incredible. Whatever I have to do, I'm going to support you to get as many more Tom Harkins that we can, and you know, and there's the story. Tomorrow Man and Gotcha4Life were born.
Amazing. And so what does Tomorrow Man stand for at the moment, or stand for currently? And I suppose I mentioned a workshop that I'd been to, the night with the blokes. But you mentioned you deliver it in schools, you deliver it in, I suppose, clubs, sporting organisations as well. What's the main goal of those workshops?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll bring it back. I mean, you're right in terms of where we do our work. I mean, you know, our mission really is just to go where there are men and boys, the everyday male here in Australia, where they are, we want to be.
Yep.
Whether that's metropolitan, whether it's regional, whether it's a school, a community, a workplace, a sporting club, God, you know, the prison system, you know, you name it. We just want to be there working with as many men as humanly possible.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess to answer the question of what happens in a workshop, I want to come to the why first of all, and that's, you know, that's the really important piece here, and it's kind of, again, one of the reasons why this thing has started, and so. I mean, we lose, as I'm sure you know, and I'm sure you've spoken about before through these talks. I mean, we're losing 8 men a day at the moment to suicide in this country, and that's a terrible statistic. It's a terrible thing. Even more so, you know, the latest statistics I think are around 82 men call the ambulance service every day because of suicidal thoughts, and so, you know, for us, that's just unacceptable. That's something that we're not comfortable with, losing that amount of men, let alone anyone, mind you, is just something that we're not okay with. And so we don't want men dying. We don't want men and boys feeling like they've got no other option and no other way. And I guess for us, you know, it's about saying if men can learn to articulate emotion better, then, you know, then hopefully we can get ahead or upstream of, you know, the issues, some of the, you know, mental health related issues and otherwise that lead a man to, you know, to take that course of action. Hopefully we can get ahead of that and save people's lives. And so, yeah, I mean, in a workshop, I mean, there are a number of different formats that we do. We do the Blokes nights that you mentioned that you'd been along to. So it's it's an open invite to any bloke in the community to come along and just have a conversation with a group of guys. We do this work in schools with young boys, and everything in between. In the workshops, you know, all we do is we give men an insight into our history as men, the stereotype. You know, we ask the guys, hey, what is the stereotype? We're not telling you. You tell us. And often what we explore is the light and shade, the dark and the light of the stereotype, and obviously talk about the consequences of the darker side of the stereotype that can lead to the things I've just talked about. And then I think it's like, you know, what we're not trying to say is that Tomorrow Man is the answer in a workshop. All we are is simply just asking the question. It's like if these are the dark sides of the traditional stereotype, and we've determined that they're not serving us that well because they're leading to men taking their own lives, then who do you want to be as the man of tomorrow? Like what's your version of masculinity for tomorrow so that you can live a healthier life? And really the workshops are about getting into a room with a bunch of blokes, holding space for them, and just having a kind of no holds barred conversation that helps guys build their emotional muscle. And it's, you know, you've been in them. It's a beautiful thing to watch. You get into a room full of blokes. some of whom don't know why they're there and are a bit sort of gruff and arms crossed. It's like, what's this thing about, you know?
Yeah.
But then they get in a room full of guys and they watch a bloke share what's going on for him, like really going on for him underneath the surface, because it's there for all of us as guys. We just don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
And they see these guys kind of opening up, some of them for the very first time, and they witness that and they feel that, hang on a minute, that's not an emasculating thing. That's not weak. You know, you're not a pussy for doing that sort of thing. Excuse the language. It's actually, it's just a bloke doing emotion. And in fact, you know, a bloke doing emotion's actually an incredibly masculine thing, and removes the stigma from blokes being emotional. That's kind of what happens in the workshops.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was following along your conversation, and I can follow along in my head of what went on in the evening. And I'm sure there's some people that are listening thinking that sounds really confronting. And I've tried to explain that to somebody before. You know, you go to a room, create a really safe environment. You go through exercises like that walk to the line exercise, and it's building this emotional muscle, learning how to talk to your mates. And it's something you've got to experience, because it sounds really weird. So what, I suppose, based on that, what's the key feedback that you get from people after these types of events, from all these sort of different blokes from different backgrounds and different, I suppose, parts of the country? Yeah,
man. It's like, it's so wide ranging, and I mean, we love the challenge of the guy that, you know, is again asked the question of why am I here, and is very close. We love that challenge. They're normally the guys that go there first the most. That's one of the most beautiful things to say. But look, I mean, the feedback is always, you know, it's quite universally. I didn't quite know why I was coming to this. Yeah. And I didn't quite know what this was going to be about. Yeah. But I didn't know that was possible. I've never seen another guy access what he did. I didn't know that was possible for myself. And actually, yeah, that was a real experience. That was a really positive thing. Like watching that guy share what was going on for him actually made me lean in and say, mate, I've got your back. Like, I don't know you, but I've got your back. So most of the feedback is that people, you know, guys, men, boys, the like, have a really profound experience. And as I said, they come away from it, you know, thinking that it's, you know, it's not an emasculine thing to be emotional, but it is actually masculine. I mean, what I would say, Mark, like, think about how men gather and interact, and you'd know this, but, you know, often as blokes we get together and we interact, normally doing something, an activity, like we're at the pub having a beer, typically not face to face, looking at each other, but side by side, watching a screen, watching footy. Yeah. You know, maybe we're running together, like whatever it is, we're always doing something, and we're never actually really sitting in the space, holding one another and having a really good conversation. Yeah. And often, you know, blokes come out of the workshop saying, hang on a minute, like, yeah, I think I can kind of get beyond the banter, which is still awesome, by the way. Like, there's an absolute place for that, but I can get beyond the banter, and I can have, you know, a deeper conversation with a mate. I can practice asking a second and third question. I can practice the skill of actually really holding space and listening and being there for them. Yeah. And we just think that's awesome, because it's like we want as many guys as possible to be able to learn and practice that skill as much as possible, so that, you know, when and if the time comes in their life, God forbid it does, that they have to access that skill to either ask for help for themselves, or really reach out to a mate that's in trouble. They can do that, and they've had practice at it when the stakes are really high.
Yeah. And that's the key thing I took away from it as well, because you've set these workshops up in such a way that it doesn't feel weird. It doesn't feel too soft. It, you know, you can tell that you guys have put some real thought into the language you're using, into some of the exercises, which typically I hate exercises at these types of things, but I think they're set up in such a way that they don't feel weird. And to your point, you walk out and I felt as though I've got something else in my toolkit that I can use when I need to. And you've set it up again in a way where, like, the last thing I want is for all of my relationships with my mates to be all touchy-feely and all the time.
Yeah.
But
cool.
you're right, it's just because, yeah, as soon as we left, we're back to taking the piss out of each other. But, you know, you've then got some, to your point, you've got some depth in your relationships. And you know that if I go through something, or if my mate goes through something, you've got each other's back properly. Not just that, well, I've got your back, mate, but I don't know how to ask you.
Yeah. It's you know, it's an interesting one. The stats are something like 80% of blokes, and you would have seen this, but 80% of blokes say that they're always there for their mates, but yet something like less than 50% of blokes say that if they were in trouble, that they would actually reach out for help for their mates.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting juxtaposition, but the point of all of this is, I guess it's like, we're not here to tell men that they can't be men and that being a bloke is a bad thing. We'd never want to tell a man that at all, you know, and quite frankly, there are some really great things about the stereotype that serve us really well in certain situations. But we can't operate at that all the time. And so really, you know, coming out of the work, again, being armed with the skills, hopefully blokes are walking away saying, well, that's okay. I can have this part of me, but there's something on the other side of the coin that I can use that can serve me equally as well, if not better, in other situations.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And where do you see, I know, I can't even remember when it was now, whether it was a month ago or 6 months ago, but you've got Tomorrow Woman as well now.
Yeah.
So what's the direction of Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman, and I suppose what do you see happening in the next, let's say, 12 months or further?
Yeah, great. I mean, I love this question because we have it all the time internal. I mean, the first thing I would say is that Tomorrow Woman's not just a now thing. I mean, Tomorrow Woman's been operating for almost as long. We've been running workshops in that space for about 3 years now. You know, and look, I guess the challenge for women, you know, is as deep an issue but different as the challenge for men. I mean, we still lose 2 beautiful women a day in this country to suicide, which in itself is terrible. But all the research tells us that, you know, that pre-teenage years, around years 9 through 12, that girls lose their voice. They you know, they lose their confidence. They actively choose to keep their opinions to themselves, and that unfortunately it doesn't come back as a result of the system that they live in. And so again, you know, the Tomorrow Woman stuff's been running for 3 odd years now, and it's about, you know, again, equipping girls and women with the ability to kind of reconnect with that voice inside.
Yeah.
and give them the skills and the confidence to be able to use the voice for again, either the small moments or the big, and to be who they are for who they are, not for what society, we as men, them as women, or society expects of them.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, a lot of people talk about Tomorrow Woman as in, well, you've got Tomorrow Man, you have to have Tomorrow Woman, but again, they've been in equal measure. For us, though, you know, the next 1 through 5 years, I mean, they're just exciting, really exciting in that we know that gender isn't binary. What is the question of gender that now is a really interesting one, and so we're certainly looking at how do we bring the two together.
Yeah.
In what, you know, again, it could be Tomorrow People. I'm not quite sure what it will be, but it's, you know, how do we bring men and women together, or those that identify as one or the other, and help each understand what's happened, what's going on and the perspective of the other, so that we can engage in, you know, really healthy conversation, you know, to better relationships between the two. So again, ultimately, it's about bringing both of the organisations together and looking at it as just human beings.
Oh, amazing! But and you'd still have, I suppose, your separate Tomorrow Man, Tomorrow Woman sessions, but then you'd also have one in between to, I suppose, for each other to understand the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. That if I were kind of whiteboarding the, you know, the journey on a paper, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we have to be able to, again, allow men and women to understand what's happening for themselves first and their current context first.
Yeah.
And that's the work we're doing in Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman. But long term, it's, you know, we're doing all this work with trying to shift a generational mindset around the understanding of themselves, and it's like, how do we then use that for good to bring them together so that they can understand one another better.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And before we jump into some of the fun questions, because I know you're a bit of a runner as well, so you've been at Tomorrow Man for 18 months, we were talking about just before we jumped on the call. So how has working with or working at Tomorrow Man changed you and your relationship with your mates and family?
Yeah, I mean, incredibly. I was in a very different career before this. I think we've spoken about this before, but I was in a corporate career, and albeit I loved what I did, I was just seeking something more purposeful. And for my own reasons around my own childhood and my own story growing up as a young male in outer western suburbs of Melbourne, with a not so great early life. I also had a chance meeting with Tom, and through the organisation that I worked with, I was thinking about making change, and Tom and I got chatting, and it was, like, I look back on it now and it almost seems like it was just kind of ordained to be. Like, I met him, we got talking about the work of Tomorrow Man, and I had no choice but to leave my job and come and join the team, and I just, I feel like I've been here forever, and I wouldn't do anything else for the world. So that's kind of how I arrived here.
Yeah. And do you feel as though it has changed your relationship with your mates, and through learning some of the, I suppose, the tools that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, again, as I said, incredibly, and on so many different levels. I had a long-standing kind of distant relationship, troubled relationship with my father, and I'm really, really pleased to say that I love him very much, and I have never been closer to my dad than I have been now, and I put a lot of that down to the stuff that I've been learning as a bloke here, Tomorrow Man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm one of those guys that would say, I mean, I got a close circle of mates. It's, you know, maybe 8, 9, 10 of us. We went to school together. We grew up as teenagers, and we've kind of stuck fat as we've grown up as adults and had families and the like. And I would have always said, oh, yeah, I'm there for them. I love them.
Yeah.
I'll do anything for them. But you realize pretty quickly, like once you start learning some of this stuff, you realize pretty quickly, hang on, how much do I really know about these guys? Like, how much am I really there for all of them? How much do I know about them?
Yeah.
And how often are we having conversations that go beyond the banter that we have? Because we're great at that. We're awesome at giving each other shit. And yeah, so most definitely. And they would, I mean, if they see this, they'd say I'm quite annoying at times, because I love kind of going a bit deeper with them. So, you know, when we're doing this at the moment a lot, we're doing a lot of Zooms because we can't go to the pub and have a beer, and, you know, we'll have a check-in and just do a quick run around on how we're actually all going in this time. If someone's got something going on that we know of, we'll ask, we'll talk about it as a group of mates. If I sense there's something happening for a mate, I'll ask, and just provide some space to let him talk. And you know, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have known how to do that.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way since going to a couple of your sessions and listening to podcasts from Tom and from Gussie, and yeah, it's definitely changed my relationships with my family and friends.
Yeah.
So amazing. So yeah, before we finish up, some fun questions. So what is your favorite race?
Yeah. So I'm assuming you mean running race.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, in all honesty, I don't have one. So running for me is actually more about just managing my own mental fitness and mental resilience. So yeah, running's pretty selfish for me. But I was reading about this a little early this morning. I'm a massive Star Wars fan, Mark, and I hear that there's a Star Wars marathon where like people dress up as Yoda and Chewbacca and all that sort of stuff and go and run a marathon. Like, it's somewhere near Disneyland Resort in the States. So I must check it out. No, that might quickly become my favorite race.
Oh, we got the wrong date, didn't we? We should have put this out a couple of days ago.
Exactly.
Do you listen to anything when you run?
Yeah, I do. I can't run without something. I get really bored.
Yeah.
So yeah, generally it's tuned to playlist. Like for running, it needs to be high tempo, high intensity. So like I'll put some EDM on or whatever it is. Like there's a raft of different playlists that I'll listen to on Spotify. And I'll only ever break that up for a podcast. There's 2 podcasts that I listen to religiously. One of them is a podcast called Hardcore History, Dan Carlin.
Okay, yeah.
If you haven't checked it out, it's amazing. Great storyteller. And the other one's a podcast called Binge Mode, which is a little bit nerdy, but it's, check it out and you'll see what I mean. So I'll break it up. Cool. I'll break it up with podcasts of those sorts. Otherwise it's tunes for sure.
Awesome. And how many pairs of running shoes do you own?
4. Yep.
Who's been the biggest influence on your life so far?
There are 2, but the biggest. So yeah, I mean, there's an ex boss of mine, and now, you know, dear friend and mentor. I mean, we worked together for nearly 15 years. You know, in a period in my life where I was transitioning from, you know, kind of reckless young adult to, you know, to father and man. Yeah. And, you know, in the absence of my own father at that time, he was an incredible positive role model that exemplified, quite frankly, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about. Yeah. He taught me a lot about business. He taught me a lot about family. He taught me a lot about life. So I owe him a lot. I owe him a lot now.
And do you have a favorite quote?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So there's a Martin Luther King quote, which you might have heard, but it says, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, just keep moving forward. And it's a quote that I kind of live my life by. I never like standing still. I like learning. I like to be moving forward in life. And it's just something that rings really true.
Yeah, I love that one as well.
Yeah.
And finally, where can people go to find out more about Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman?
Go to the websites, obviously. So www.tomorrowman.com.au or tomorrowwoman.com.au. And check us out on Insta and Facebook. So Insta for Tomorrow Man's tomorrowman_AU. And Facebook's Tomorrow Man Australia. And likewise, Tomorrow Woman _AU and the like for Tomorrow Woman.
Awesome. And a big shout out to Tom, who is on paternity leave.
Yeah, he is. He's second time father, 6 weeks in, I think he is. They're going really well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Adam. It's been great chatting to you and actually seeing you for the first time. But yeah, thank you so much. I think the work that you guys do is just amazing. And I can't wait to get Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman into my local community.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you again for having me, and good luck with the rest of the runs, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much, mate. Speak to you soon. Cheers, Adam.